The next step is going to be to create a private room for each collection. And to do that, we want to basically add another page that's going to be our room page. And that's where we will list each of the tokens that you have in your wallet for that collection. And it'll show the collection name as the name of the room. And we'll have a chat section down below where you can chat. So let's start by doing some page layout. Right now we just have these two pages. This is the row for the NFT chat room list. So I'm just going to move that down there, and let's add a couple of new pages. So I'm going to add a page here, and this will be called room detail. And that's going to be the main room page, but I want to add another one that's going to be for our list of assets. So this one, we'll call it asset thumbnail. That's fine. And let's zoom back out, take a look here. All right, so room detail and our asset thumbnail. For the room detail page, I'm going to drop in a div, of course, just to get some styling added. And I'll just add some padding around my page. I'm going to want a title, which is the name of this collection and the name of the room. So I'm going to use my heading element, and we'll call this room name. And I'm going to want an image as well, because I want to add a little pizzazz. So we're going to have an image up top that is the banner image from our collection, and I'm going to add a little bit of styling to this. Let's say for the size, I want the max height to be 300. Let's call it. And that'll be good. And then let's see what else. We want a back button because as we enter these rooms, we want to be able to go back. So I'm going to add a button. Let's put it right above the room name, maybe. And let's just call this back. And now we want a section where you can pick who you're going to be chatting as. So I'm going to add another div to this page. Let's see, I want it on the bottom. I'm going to name this first one div room details. And the second one will be div chatting as. And let's add a little bit of styling here, just some padding again. And in this section, we're going to have a grid list that's going to load all of the tokens that you have in that collection. So, of course, for a grid list, we're going to need a row page, and that's what we have right here. That's the purpose of this asset thumbnail. I'm going to set the width of this to be like 150 pixels. And back on my main page on my grid list, under row page, I'm going to select what did we call this? Asset thumbnail. That's going to be the row page for this. And this thumbnail, we want an image. So let's drop an image in there. And we also want a name or a title. So I'm going to use a heading. And this will be just asset name by default. There we we go. There's our image. I'm going to set a max width on this to 150. There we go. And then I want this list to be horizontal. Basically, I want to not have a vertical list of assets. So on my main page, in my grid list, I'm just going to add a little bit of styling. Let's go layout, and I'm going to change the layout to flex, which will just give me this sort of horizontal layout here. And on my thumbnail page, I forgot to add a div, but I want to do that so I can have some padding. All right, that should be good. Okay, so that's the layout for our room. We actually have too much padding on this bottom section, so I'm going to set this to 0. And on this top section, same thing. Take that bottom padding off. There we go. Bring the name a little closer to our assets. All right, so this is the basic layout for the room details and our chatting as section, where you will select your token. The last thing we need on this page is a section for our chat functionality. So I'm going to add one more div, and I want this one on the bottom. And this one will be called div chat. Add some padding. And in here, let's have another div that's going to be our chat input. And I'll put a input, just a text input is good, and a button. And we will set this to flex. Text input, I'm going to set the width here to maybe 400 pixels. The button is going to be named send. That'll be our submit button. And we'll leave that like that. And then this is where you'll send the message. We also need to be able to see all the messages that have been sent already. So we'll do that by adding another grid list below. And we'll put that in a div as well. And this will be our div chat feed. Let's get some spacing. Let's do maybe 30 pixels here. And a grid list. So that's where our feed will go. We need a page for each row in the chat. So basically for each message that's sent into the chat, we want a row page. So let's add a new page, put it like here, call it chat message. And in this chat message page, we're going to want a div with some padding. Let's do maybe 20 pixels. And our message itself should have two elements. We want to have the icon or the avatar of the person who sent the message, and then we want the message. So let's first add an image. and I'm going to set this to be very small, maybe a width and height of 50 pixels. That might be too big, but yeah, that's a little too big. Let's go 30. So width and height of 30. I want this to be rounded, so I'm going to add a radius of 15. It's half of 30, so that'll make a nice perfect circle. And we want the message itself, so I'm just going to use a paragraph for that. And I'm going to set this div to flex. And I want these all centered vertically. And I want my text box to give me a little bit of margin before my image. That's too much. Let's do 20. All right. And I'm going to take out the default message off of this text paragraph just so that we don't see anything loaded before the message gets loaded in. All right. So there's our chat message. That's our row page. So if we go back to our main page and go to our chat feed grid list, we can select this chat message as our row, and we can see it's loading in a few of those as a placeholder. So that's about it for the page layout. Actually, I do want to make these asset names smaller. They're in H2. Let's make them like an H4. There we go. And we've now got our layout. I want to start connecting each of these data points, each of these elements, to a data point from our OpenSea collection. So just as a recap and to step back, we have a list of chat rooms. Our user is going to click on one of these, and when they select one of these chat rooms, we want to bring them to this page, which is the room detail, and we want to load all of these room details. So to get that started, we're going to use our on-click event when we click on this room name as our trigger to show all of our data and show our room. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to have a div as our container that will load this room detail into when clicked. And our on-click action is going to be on this room row page. So we want our div to be here as well. So let's change the name of this one just so that we keep these separate. That'll be div room name. And then I want to add another one. And I'll call this one div room detail. And on this one, I want it to take up the whole page. Right now, this room row is only taking up this one section. I want it to take up the whole page. So I'm going to set the width and height of these to be 100%. So let's do 100% width, 100% height. For the layout, I want to set the position, and we're going to use fixed for this. So I'll set a fixed position. It's always going to stay basically, at 0 pixels from the top and 0 pixels from the left, and 100%, which will cover the whole thing. I'm going to set a background color so that it covers the entire page, the chat rooms page. So on background, set the color to white. And I want to set the Z index so that this is in front of everything else that's on the page, basically in front of the chat room. And I could do that under layout, Z index, and I really just need to set it to something higher than what it's currently at. I'll just set it to 2. The default's actually 0. And of course, I'm going to add some padding to this page. Okay. So that's where we're going to load. Actually, I don't need padding because what I'm going to load into this is my room detail, and this already has padding. So don't need to add any padding there, but I do want to set this to hidden by default. So the display I'm going to set to none, and we're not going to show it until we've got our data loaded. All right, so on our button for room name, we're going to add an event on click, and we want to add a new flow, and we'll call this open room. And in this, we want to add a action that says open page into container. And the page that I want to open is my room detail. And the container that I want to open it into is this room detail div that I just created. And we don't need to run an action after that, so we can leave those as a default. So first, let's make sure that this functionality is working the way we want, and we're loading our default page, and then we can connect the data. The last thing I do like to do is on our button, I like to set the pointer to, or the cursor to pointer. That way the user has some visual feedback when they mouse over that this is a button. And then the last thing we need to do is we want to show this room detail div, because remember we have that set to hide by default. So we're going to add this action element show, and the element we want to show is room detail. So we will show that. Now let's test this out. We will refresh. Connect to MetaMask. We see our loading message. We see our assets get loaded, or I should say our collections get loaded. So we have a list of rooms, one for each collection. If I mouse over, I can see my cursor changes, so I know it's a clickable area. I'm going to click on one, and we have our that didn't work. Connect to MetaMask. We see our loading message for a second. We see our list of collections, and I can see that if I mouse over any of these, my cursor changes. I'm going to click on one, and it's not loading in the right position. I know the mistake I made. So under room detail, I talked about setting the position of this to fixed right here, and I said we want it to load 0 pixels from the top and 0 pixels from the left, but I didn't actually tell it to do that. got to set the top to 0 and the left to 0, and that will position it properly. So let's test it again, load our connections, select one of these from the list, and there we go. So now we've got our room page, and we can see it's just loading our placeholder right now. And the next step is to connect our data. So let's jump back into Bildr and do that. So the way that we'll do that is when the user clicks on a room and selects that room, we'll set a couple of variables to say that that's the selected connection that we can then pull into our image and our title. So in our onClick event, which is open room, after we open the page and show it, actually before we open the page, we want to do this first. We're going to set a couple of variables. So let's add a set variable and move it up to the top. And this will be on the root page. And we want to call this selected room name. And it's going to be from the variable on our current page, which is just called name. And then we want to duplicate that and do the same thing for the image. So we'll set a variable called selected room image on our root page. And instead of name, if we look at our API docs, we can see there's this banner image URL. That's what I want to use. So I'll put that in as the variable banner image URL, and that will set our image. And I'm just going to tell this to wait until our variables are set, then open our page into the container and then show it. So then on our room detail page, under our image, this will be changed to URL as the source because we know that's what our API is giving it. And then we want to create a flow on page load that loads these up. So under flows, page load, we want to add a couple of actions. So set value. And the first element that we want to set the value of will be our image. And we want to set it from a variable on our root page. And that is selected room image. And then I'll duplicate this and do the same thing for our room name. And the variable is selected room name. All right, let's test this out. So we connect to MetaMask, see our loading message, get our rooms. I'm going to click one of the rooms. And now we get our room detail with our banner image and the name of our room. So this is great. Now we've got our room detail. The next thing we need is to load our list of tokens that you can choose from to send a message. So we'll do that in the next lesson, but we've got our private rooms now. And next we'll move on to choosing our NFTs. I'll see you in the next one.